So originally, before we started StudyFetch, we started this small little essay writing company. And we were like, hey, is this something we want to do long term? Is this a sustainable business? And morally, do we want to help students basically cheat their way through life? And the answer was no to all of those things. So we scrapped the business entirely, and in September of 23 launched StudyFetch, which was basically the opposite of that. ChatGPT is very much a productivity tool, and it's designed to give you the answer as soon as possible, or designed to help you get through a task as soon as possible. That's not how you learn. That's actually quite the opposite, and you need to be guided, and you need to be taught over time, and need to be showcased the right things that will reach the aha moment as you keep on learning and progressing through difficult topics. And I think that everyone will basically have accessibility to their own mini school, their ability to have their own teacher, their ability to have that content that's being provided to them from A to Z.
Welcome to Subversive, a podcast dedicated to sharing stories from the best consumer subscription apps in the world. We'll bring you lessons for how to grow your consumer subscription business, including insights and inflection points that led to exponential growth from leaders at category-defining companies and innovative startups. Let's get into the show. This episode is brought to you by RevenueCat. The world's best apps use RevenueCat to power purchases, manage customer data, and grow revenue on iOS, Android, and the web. Join more than 100,000 apps that are already using RevenueCat to grow their businesses and track more than $10 billion in spend, including category leaders like OpenAI, Notion, and Ladder. Learn more at revenuecat.com/subversive. My guest today is Esan Durrani, co-founder and CEO of StudyFetch, an AI-native learning platform that is already used by over 7 million students worldwide. In this episode, I talked to Esan about how StudyFetch found initial product market fit with an AI tutor that actually helps students learn rather than giving them easy answers, about the specific strategies and tactics the company has used to power its student creator program, which has already generated over 2 billion social media views to date, and about its recent bet on Honen, a B2B skill building platform that it launched with NVIDIA as a flagship partner. All right, welcome, Esan, to the Subversive Podcast. Really excited to have you on today to talk about StudyFetch, which is an AI-powered study platform for students and one of the fastest growing edtech companies in the country right now. So before we jump into your background, tell us a little bit more about what StudyFetch is for those who don't already know.
Yeah, so I guess to put it very simply, StudyFetch is a platform for college students where you upload your course materials, and then transfer that into any sort of piece of information or content that you want to turn it into. So whether that's practice tests, flashcards, tutoring sessions, or all of that in one place, you can have that whole learning ecosystem in one environment for yourself.
Awesome. Well, and as somebody who spent almost 4 years leading the product growth team at Quizlet, this is a space I know quite well. And so I'm very excited to get into the discussion with you today. Before we get to StudyFetch, let's talk a little bit more about your background. So before you became a tech entrepreneur, you were a musician. You spent many years as a drummer and did hundreds of live shows. What was that experience like? And what led you from being a musician into becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's so crazy. It was so long ago, it almost feels like a double life at this point. But I think there was a couple interesting learnings that I came out of that from that experience. I think the first thing is understanding that there's two different types of viewers when it comes to who you're performing for. Performance is a big part of that kind of experience that I learned through. But the main thing was there's the people that you're playing with, and then there's also the audience that you're playing for. Very similarly to when you're working with in a team environment, or you're working with, or you're trying to connect to college students specifically. There's two very different types of audience that you're catering for, and in that you have to understand specific things like, how do I simplify this for the average person or for the average audience that I'm catering towards, and then vice versa. How do I make sure that I'm connecting with the team that I'm working with, or like the band members that I'm playing alongside? So I think from that experience, I learned that there's multiple different angles to performance.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And I feel like students in particular are a fickle audience. Oftentimes they're very busy. They can have short attention spans. And so really just understanding your audience and how to connect with them has been a huge part of your success, which we'll talk more about on the episode today. So you and your co-founder, Ryan, reconnected in college after going to middle school together many years ago. And from what I understand, you tried a number of different ideas that failed before you came across StudyFetch. So what was it about StudyFetch that ultimately helped you to break through? And what did that origin story look like?
Yeah, I mean, I will say going through those trials and tribulations of creating a bunch of side projects here and there was a huge part of where we've ended up today. I think in absence of that, there would have been a lot more learnings that would have came out on the other side, more recently. But having that experience is super helpful in developing StudyFetch. But a little bit of context as to when we first started and why we started StudyFetch was, while I was in college at the time, writing essays was a big part about, being in college, and basically like every other week you'd have to write essays. When GPT-3's API came out, I started using that within my classwork, and I realized, oh
Mhm.
my God, this is going to like absolutely change the world. So originally, before we started StudyFetch, we'd started this small little essay writing company, which was quite literally you type in a topic, then it spits out an essay for you, basically.
Mhm.
And when we launched that, we'd actually marketed on TikTok a little bit. It was a little bit before ChatGPT came out, actually. And when ChatGPT came out, like people actually started believing that this was a technology that was real and realistic. And we had blown up for a little bit, and we're a bootstrap and profitable, like small little business. But we'd actually scrapped that business entirely, and we took a step back, and we were like, hey, like, is this something we want to do long term? Is this a sustainable business? And morally, do we want to help students basically
Mm.
like cheat their way through life? And the answer was no to all of those things. So we scrapped the business entirely, and in
Mhm.
September of 23 launched StudyFetch, which was basically the opposite of that. And one thing to note about that as well is we were a little bit concerned going into that with the notion of, hey, is are college students actually going to care about this type of technology? Is this
Mhm.
something that they're going to resonate with? And luckily the answer was yes. And basically the second video we ever posted about StudyFetch, blew up on social media. So, which I can get into later, but that's kind of like the origin story of why we started StudyFetch.
Yeah, well, good for you for having the guts to abandon the initial essay writing concept. I feel like a lot of college students would have just said, hey, this is a great side project. I could make a little bit of beer money doing this. And they would have just stayed at it. But it sounded like you guys, number one, you wanted to be true to your mission of helping college students learn and not just help them cheat. And two, you saw a much bigger opportunity to build something bigger and better. And I think that's a great transition into the core topic for today. So let's start by just talking about how StudyFetch found its initial product market fit. When you guys started, the obvious move would have been to build another answer engine like Chegg or Course Hero or one of these other legacy ed tech companies that typically had been not necessarily about helping students cheat, but helping them get answers and get help on homework assignments. But you build an AI tutor that actually refused to hand over easy answers to students and instead really forced them to learn. So, what was the insight that gave you confidence that that was the right bet?
Yeah, so when we first started, before we'd even launched the product, we talked to, I would want to say over like 120 to 150 college students and interviewed them directly to try to get insights on what was missing specifically from their education and how like AI can actually like fit that gap. Because it was so new to everyone that people didn't actually recognize that this technology would help them in so many different ways. I think through those insights, we came to the other side of the conclusion of understanding, hey, it's not actually only just about saving time for students. It's also about helping them understand concepts that they would have otherwise not understood in the way that the material is presented to them. So a big learning that we came out of it was students are being, fed so many large pieces of course materials. They're being fed like 1,000-page textbooks, and how can we process that in a way that they will actually understand it? Because how you learned 150 years ago is not how you learn today. And
Mm-hmm.
content and materials are just constantly changing so much that students need to keep up, otherwise they'll be behind in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And I know you and I have talked about this a little bit outside of the context of this podcast, just the fact that the game used to be, as a student, how do I get the best grades in the shortest amount of time so that I can graduate with a high enough GPA that somebody will come along and hire me, whether it's going into med school or joining a law firm or going into business. You just needed to get that first job, and that was largely dependent on grades. But I feel like more and more with AI progressing as fast as it is, and so many of these entry level jobs getting eliminated, it's not about grades anymore. Like you have to graduate with real skills, which means you really have to learn something. You can't just get a bunch of easy A's and call it a day. And so you guys have built an entire suite of products and features that help students do this. You have your core Spark tutor, but then you also have study plans, flashcards, quizzes, practice tests. You've got arcade, you've got tutor me, you have all these different features. So how do you manage to maintain such a rapid pace of product development?
The evolution of the product is a big part of how we're thinking about it. So when we first started, we were very much features driven. So really trying to cater towards, is this use case going to be very helpful to a student, and will it blow up on social media, basically? And starting off that way was super helpful in our growth. But as you progress over time, as you mentioned, there's so many features in the product. How do you make sure that students understand, hey, is this the right place to go? There's so many different things to choose from. Like, where do I start? Right. Over time, we developed a learning experience basically built around this concept of a study plan, which is how do I take
Mm-hmm.
all these different suite of tools that I'm learning through and putting it in a certain order that I could actually understand I'm mastering through these topics. by creating a study plan, basically showcasing, okay, I upload this material, then I'm going to do a practice test first, then I'm going to do 3 flashcard sessions next, then I'm going to do a tutoring session, or whatever the order might be for you. We developed this thing called the Learn Engine, which is basically understanding how to progress through topics in the fastest possible way to reach learning mastery. For example, we can understand through 1,000 students that took supply and demand on StudyFetch what were the best possible ways and different modalities of learning that actually led to success for a student, and then surface that to the next student in the best possible way. And I think especially for consumer product, it's so important to actually show the user the value instead of them trying to pull it out of you. So that's the biggest thing that we're working on over time is especially in education too, like making sure that you're guiding students and not just setting them up for failure by having this suite of tools that no one understands how to use.
Yeah, I think the point you made around personalization there is so important, because if you think about how the last wave of edtech companies made their money, we talked a little bit about it before. It was largely about providing answers, right? Providing textbook solutions, helping students get unstuck on homework assignments, helping them study for exams to a degree. But it was all about content. And so Chegg was one of the very first ed tech companies, although their legacy business was actually offline textbook rentals. And then they pivoted around 2015 into online textbook solutions. But as time has gone on, and particularly with ChatGPT and AI now, like the content has become commoditized. You can find answers to textbook solutions or homework assignments in many places. And so more and more, the value is coming not from the content, but from personalized study plans and study strategies to help students actually learn the subjects they're studying. And it sounds like all of these different features you've built provide different tools in the toolkit of a student to get to those learnings, but then also you're increasingly using AI to personalize their individual experience with those features. Do I have that right? And how are you finding that different students are using StudyFetch in different ways to ultimately get the learning they need?
Yeah, totally. And I think going back to the point of, legacy edtech products, the biggest thing that AI exposed was, yes, the fact that content is now a commodity, but also the fact that that use case is very superficial for students. It's not really solving a profound problem that is the underlying issue of learning, because learning is very difficult to teach, and learning is a very difficult thing to do. So I think what AI is allowed to unlock is making it more engaging, making it more fun, making it easier for learners to actually get on the platform and start from scratch. I think one thing when I was in college that I kept on going back on was, I don't even want to start learning this material. There's so much to learn from and so much to start with that I don't even know where to start. So I think quite literally just taking all that information and putting it into StudyFetch and having a place to start makes such a big difference in the first place. And I think when it comes to the breakdown of the features, we've made sure that we've created a suite of tools that people actually want to use. And when they're visually shown those features, they know where to start, and they have a place that they have a preference to where to start.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's true of so many things. It's like just taking the first step is often the hardest part. And particularly as a college freshman, it could be so overwhelming when week one, you have all these different courses. You've got these syllabi with a very long list of textbooks and other materials that you have to consume in a short period of time. And it can just be overwhelming. And I think a lot of students never really get out of the gate with that. And so having AI sort of break it down into parts and help you manage the process of just taking one step at a time, I think that alone is really valuable. So you claim that 92% of active students on StudyFetch report improved grades. And then on average, they're reducing their study time by up to 30%. So how is StudyFetch achieving those results? And do you see those results continuing to get better and better over time as the product evolves?
Yeah, I think going back to that exact point around having a place to start makes such a big difference. There's been so many use cases around specifically med students who have seen success with StudyFetch. And when I think about the content that's being provided to them and the things that they have to do, that's kind of like the most extreme version of what a student needs to accomplish. That's why med students are very much gravitating towards StudyFetch as a platform that they find is like their hub and their main place to learn. There's actually a case study that we have around a student that actually failed out of med school, and through the progression over time of understanding through their friends, like, hey, like, what study tools should I use? She eventually came around to StudyFetch, and StudyFetch specifically was a platform that she was able to find her version of learning that worked for her. And going back to the idea of having a place to start, the issue with how education is set up right now is that there isn't a place for people to necessarily learn that information in a way that they can grasp internally. I think a reasoning for why students are seeing better grades is simply because they're finding their home, they're finding their location, they're finding their place, and they're finding their learning tools that work for them internally and works for their mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, a lot has been written about different types of learners, and you've got visual learners and auditory learners and textual learners and applied learners who just want to get out into the world and experience it for themselves. And I happen to be somebody who worked pretty well within the standard classroom environment and taking standardized tests and that sort of thing. But that's not for everyone. And oftentimes the people who are most successful in life are people who struggle in school because, they're very practical and they're very action oriented, but they don't want to just sit in a classroom and learn from a professor all day. And so it does feel like all of these different products and features you've built really do help to adapt any subject to an individual student and help them learn in the way that feels right for them. And in fact, there have been a number of case studies that have found that StudyFetch most benefits the students with learning differences and helps to raise the lowest grades in a class, which effectively compresses this achievement gap that you often see. So why do you think that is? And what sort of implications might that have on the future of education?
Yeah, for sure. I think going back to the idea that people have different learning styles, it's been a controversial topic actually in the education space as to whether that's like a true fact or not, that people actually have different learning styles. And I think there's some truth to it, and there's also other nuances to it. So for example, on StudyFetch, you're not necessarily only, if you're a visual learner, you're not only learning things visually. You're also getting questions through the tutor. You're also finding ways to learn with memorization via flashcards. So I think going back to like having a place to start, if you feel like you're a visual learner, that helps you engage and actually start progressing and start using the material and start actually like learning over time. Having the ability to have an experience that feels like you're almost like talking with a human basically captures like a new dimension of learning. It feels like, almost like 4D instead of 3D kind of a thing, or 4D instead of 2D.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I feel like there's a lot of concerns right now that AI is going to leave people behind. And so seeing an application of AI like this that's actually helping the people who are most behind catch up and close those gaps is really encouraging. So let's get a little bit more tactical. This podcast is all about growth. And so we like to talk about inflection points that drive a company's growth. And you all have been particularly successful with this innovative student creator program you have, where you are tapping into real populations of student influencers and creators on channels like TikTok or Instagram to spread the word of StudyFetch and get it into the hands of more than 7 million registered students at this point. Let's just start with, how important has this creator program been, and what percentage of your user acquisition is driven by that creator program right now?
I mean, I guess I'll just get into the progression of how we developed a marketing engine over time, starting with the seed that was planted to actually create this creator program, which was posting videos ourselves internally. So when we first started StudyFetch, we launched it, and a couple of days after started posting videos directly on social media internally. Our CMO Kieran would quite literally pull out his phone, go to a lecture hall, and start recording what StudyFetch looks like in a classroom setting. And when we first started that, we'd gone viral right away because we understood our user and understood the exact use case that people needed. And I think when it comes to going viral on social media, the underlying thing that makes a product go viral is it actually useful to people? If they don't find it useful, you're never going to go viral. If you're trying to market something that doesn't work, then you don't really have a chance. So I think that was a great place to start. And in that, like filming those lecture hall videos, we actually had one video get over 76 million views on one specific video organically on Instagram. So that kind of started this confidence that we had around, hey, like if we're able to scale this exact strategy across multiple people, we're basically just like showcasing our use case to as many people as possible. So then we progressed over that next school year to scale it from one person to 5 people, and then from 5 people to 20 people, and then from 20 people to up to 400 people, right? And obviously there's a limitation to how many creators and like balancing the creators and quality and making sure that the videos that are going out is exactly what we want to represent from a branding perspective. But yeah, I mean, the creator program has been a very strong driver of our growth. The biggest thing about the creator program is it's definitely a combination between performance marketing and brand marketing. I would say more on the brand marketing side, because the idea is that you want to be everywhere all at once, basically. The benefit of having a creator program is that you're posting videos that consistently are driving views over time. So even if you don't post for, 3 months, you're still going to get the results of those views that were those videos that were posted a few months earlier.
Yeah, well, I think this relates to this army of creators or army of accounts concept that I've heard you and the team talk about at StudyFetch, which is you got hundreds of creators now who are posting over 100 short form videos a day in many cases across TikTok and Instagram. And more, I am hearing that the best companies are exercising a similar strategy where it really is about volume on TikTok in particular, because with TikTok, it's so algorithmically driven, which means that you can have nine videos completely bust, but then the 10th one will go viral and it will make up for the failures of the first 9. And so how did you guys determine that volume strategy was the right way to go? Was that something you saw other companies like Cal AI doing, or did you just empirically come to your own conclusion that was what you needed to do to be successful on these platforms?
We've tested a lot of things over time, and especially understanding a strategy like this back in 2023 when it wasn't really as well known as it is now. I think we just fell on our face a lot of the times and eventually came to the right solution, and the great thing about social media is that the feedback loop is so quick. So your ability to understand whether is this product resonating with my audience, is this video style resonating with my audience, that feedback loop quite literally happens within 24 hours because you understand the engagement on your videos. You don't need to see oh, did this video get 1 million views or not to see success? You can quite literally look at the engagement rate. What is the rates of likes to views that you're seeing? How many comments did you get? What is the sentiment of the product that you're showcasing? If you get 1 million views, how many comments are about the actual product itself? So there's a lot of different ways to get that feedback loop going. And I think what we've learned over time is you just have to be very, very close to the video from top down. You really have to make sure that, the leadership team is really spending time. Because the more that you spend time on it, the more that you're going to be able to look through that feedback loop and find those results.
Yeah, because you're just extracting the learnings about what's working and then being really insightful about what the next set of videos should look like. I guess one of the things I've heard is that the biggest challenge to managing these large creator programs is simply all of the time and energy that goes into managing hundreds of human beings, and then also knowing which content is performing well and which content isn't, so that you can double down on your winners and divest from your losers. So how do you all do that? Do you have any particular tools you're using, like third-party SaaS tools for creator management, and or have you built some of your own custom software to help you handle that?
A combination of both. So all of the tracking that we do from a performance perspective is all internal, using TikTok's API to basically understand views, engagement, all of that over time. We have our own internal spreadsheets and internal tools that we built. When it comes to the management of creators, we use Asana, for example, for tracking and making sure that people are posting on time. We actually review every single video before it gets posted. So to your point about, managing that many people, it's actually even more intense here. And we really try to make sure that every single video is going out is approved by us. Managing that relationship with creators over time is really important because creative fatigue is definitely a real thing. As people keep on posting, day by day, eventually at some point, creators are going to feel a little bit fatigued and might start running out of content ideas. So it's really important that the team internally at StudyFetch is actually building relationships with creators and helping them, succeed themselves.
This episode is brought to you by Paddle. Today's fastest growing apps are multi-channel. They use web monetization to reach new audiences, improve attribution, and boost margins. But selling on the web gets complicated fast. Managing currencies, taxes, fraud, and disputes gets increasingly difficult as companies scale. Paddle solves this. As the merchant of record for thousands of apps, including Runna, GoodNotes, Codeway, and HubX, they take on the complexity of web monetization so you can focus on growing your business. Learn more at paddle.com/subversive. The competition for attracting top creators to work on your product and pitch your brand has gotten pretty fierce. People have figured this strategy out. And so more and more consumer apps are using it. You all have positioned StudyFetch's creator program almost as a consulting service that will help these creators build their online brands, learn best practices, expand their own influencer businesses. What exactly does that look like? And how has that helped you in the war for talent in terms of attracting the best creators to your platform?
The biggest thing is when we found out the strategy in the first place, there wasn't that many companies doing it. Typically, what we see is if there's a strategy employed that the larger corporate companies are starting to implement, then that strategy is kind of saturated at that point. So realistically, the bar wasn't that high for attracting good talent at the time. So we made sure to really capitalize on the opportunity, especially this past school year, to make sure that we're capturing that creator market, basically, like the people that would resonate with our audience. So I think a big part of it was just timing, but the other part of it, when it comes to that consulting section of that, is kind of back to that relationship basis, like making sure that creators who are posting such a high volume of videos are seeing a benefit to working with us and actually having a mutual beneficial relationship. It's a unique type of relationship, having creators post 20, 30 videos a month. That wasn't really the typical influencer strategy that has existed for all these years. Typically it was, you have one creator that you go reach out to, they post one video, you send them a content brief, and then they just read off a script. But when you're working with 20, 30 people, it's a completely different relationship. And even when we first started, we actually noticed that some creators were a bit startled by the idea of doing something like this, because it was so unfamiliar to them. So helping them educate through that was also a big part of it.
So last question I want to ask before we get on to Honen, which is your B2B bet, is around what makes a great creator in 2026. You guys work with hundreds of them, so I imagine you must have seen some patterns in terms of who's most successful. And I also imagine it might look a little bit different across channels. So depending on whether you're on TikTok versus Instagram versus YouTube, it might look a little bit different. But what have you seen in terms of the characteristics that are most predictive of success for these influencer creators?
I would say there's two different types of segments of creators, and then there's more segments under that. But to simplify, there's two different types of creators. There's more of the influencer types, and there's more of the typical performance creator driven types. So when you look at the performance driven creator types, those are ones who you're working very closely with that are representing the product more specifically. So thinking through, performance-driven marketing metrics, thinking through, how do I make sure that this person is putting this specific call to action in the video, et cetera, et cetera. So for that type of person, you want someone who is, very motivated, someone who is very creative themselves, and someone who is willing to be, a thought partner with us and really work together with us and be open to a lot of suggestions and a lot of different implementations. The flip side to it, which is more of an influencer style creator, is someone that you're representing the brand, someone that's representing your brand. And the goal for that is not necessarily to drive conversions, but to have someone that's consistently posting about the product or consistently posting about your company, and is a great representation of who you want to represent. So when a college student sees you, they might not necessarily be thinking about the product, but they've heard of StudyFetch before. And eventually when they do see those performance creator driven videos, okay, I've heard about this before from someone else. Now I'm more interested in diving in more.
So let me make sure I understood this, because I think our audience is going to really love this. Everybody's trying to figure out these UGC-driven strategies on TikTok, and getting this right is so important. What I hear you saying is archetype one is the influencer who has their own following already, could be larger, could be more medium-sized, but they've got, at the very least, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or more followers on a platform like TikTok. And so as a result, you're giving them a little bit more leeway to sort of be authentic, to tell the story of your brand in the way that feels right to them and their audience. And their job is to create the halo of understanding what StudyFetch is and why it matters. And then you have the, I'm guessing, larger volume of more performance-driven creators. And they maybe don't have as large of a following, but they are very responsive, they're very motivated, and you're giving them a little bit more direction on how to best showcase your product to just convert people who've already heard of StudyFetch through the influencers who are creating the halo. Is that right? Is that the right way to think about it?
Correct. And I think, to whoever is listening to this, the way that I would think about it is think about what your current marketing function entirely is doing. Creator program is a very important part of our business, but it is a section of our marketing channel, or our entire marketing engine as a company. When you think about how does the strategy fit into the overall strategy of marketing, I would challenge people to really help understand, if I'm a viewer on TikTok and I'm seeing, these creator program style videos, how does this relate to the other assets of marketing that is happening across my company in general? I've seen a couple more larger companies start implementing creator programs, and the issues that what I would assume that they do is they contract someone who understands how to market as a creative program, but they don't understand what's happening at the rest of the other departments of the marketing function. So what you end up seeing is you see a disconnected version of what is happening on social media versus what you might see on a billboard or what you might see on like their main account. So I think like making sure that these two are interconnected and that it makes sense is super important.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are going to be grateful for this advice because, as I said, there's so much upside to it right now. It is one of the few places in consumer apps where you can find almost uncapped alpha in terms of user acquisition opportunity. And finding companies that have really done it well is hard. And you're one of those companies. So appreciate the thoughts. Let's move on to Honen. So this is the new B2B bet that you all are making that sort of expands beyond the original vision for StudyFetch, which is helping college students learn and get better grades in college, to helping people. And these could be recent graduates. It could also be existing professionals who are just trying to upskill in their existing careers, learn the skills they need to be successful on the job. And so you recently partnered with NVIDIA and you've launched this B2B training platform called Honen last month in May. What is Honen, for those who don't know, and what inspired you to build it?
I think just starting off with what StudyFetch represents and how Honen fits into that picture, education is fundamentally changing significantly, and content is consistently changing significantly as well. Stuff that was taught, last month is already changing today. And in college, people are being taught on information that was taught like 10 years ago. So people are already set up for failure going into the workforce. And I think when it comes to the workforce itself, there's so many different things, training docs, company materials that are consistently changing even more so than what's happening from an educational perspective. So I think it became very important to us to actually train and help people teach in the workforce in a world where the world is changing so quickly. But Honen specifically is, I guess to put it very simply, a course creation platform that allows head of L&D departments, internal training, people who are teaching internal training at companies to create courses in the easiest possible way and provide that course to as many of their teammates that they need in the fastest possible way. And a course that's consistently updated and training with specific individuals over time. And adapting with those individuals as well.
So let's talk a little bit more about the NVIDIA partnership, because NVIDIA recently committed $25 million to K through 12 AI education. And they chose you all to get 250,000 plus high schoolers on a path to what we'll call AI literacy, to having the requisite AI skill set to be able to be productive in the AI economy. What does that partnership look like? Why is it so important to StudyFetch and to the product you're building with Honen? And then why do you think they chose you over all of the other competitors out there, including a number of companies that have been in edtech much longer than you all have?
I think to start off, like companies like NVIDIA recognize how much is going to change over time, and they want to be on the forefront of helping be a part of this change. So why they chose us specifically was simply down to the fact that we know how to engage college students and we know to engage students in general. We know to engage the consumer. Right now, there are a lot of K through 12 products, AI education products in the market right now, but they're more or less targeted towards educators and administrators. But there has never been so far a successful product that has been able to engage the end user, which is the learner. And that's something that we've done very well and something that we've always prioritized as a business. So I think from that perspective, they really trust us to make sure that we're actually engaging the learners and getting in the hands of learners to actually see real impact.
And what are some of the things you're doing with NVIDIA out of the gate to just lay the foundation for this partnership over time?
Yeah. So for example, the K through 12, section of that partnership is only one of the many things that we're doing with them. But for example, what we're going to be doing for the K through 12 section is co-creating and building a course with them on AI literacy, and then providing that directly to districts or directly to students, and help them understand and help them train on the future and understand like what AI literacy is, as well as CUDA software, anything that's related towards, what NVIDIA wants them to understand for when they do enter the workforce. So it's a very much a long-term, like a long tail strategy. And we're making sure that we're providing the courses that are going to resonate in 10 years from now, not just what's going to happen in the next, few months.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit more about the technology. StudyFetch and Honen are both using the same underlying AI-powered learning engine, but you decided to launch them as separate products and brands. So tell me a little bit more about how you're able to apply the same learning engine that you're using for StudyFetch for course creation under Honen, And then why, even though it has shared technology, you've decided to launch them under 2 different websites, 2 different names, 2 different products.
To put it pretty simply, StudyFetch is designed to teach other people's content, while Honen is designed to teach new content and content that is created within Honen. So how the Learn Engine actually, is synergized with both products is the underlying idea of adapting over time and finding the best possible paths to mastery. Another way to look at it is how, for example, like optimizing for conversions on meta ads, for example, right? When you have meta ads that are running, you have content and you have data that's coming in, and then you are understanding over time which is the best possible ad that is seeing the highest conversion. Very similarly, kind of going back to that supply and demand example I gave, helping people understand specific topics that are actually leading to learning mastery is kind of that direction into understanding optimization over time, but specifically for learning outcomes. The biggest thing that differentiates us from a horizontal LLM is how we are optimizing for learning outcomes and not optimizing for productivity. For example, ChatGPT is very much a productivity tool, and it's designed to give you the answer as soon as possible, or designed to help you get through a task as soon as possible. Whereas that's not how you learn. That's actually quite the opposite. And you need to be guided, you need to be taught over time, and need to be showcased the right things that will reach the aha moment as you keep on learning and progressing through difficult topics. When I think about how StudyFetch and how Honen both have that learning engine and how it helps each other, is the underlying idea that concepts and topics that are being taught are going to continuously get better and better and better via the learning engine. And teaching that information is going to always get better as content adapts and as we learn more about how people are taking courses, or on StudyFetch, how people are progressing through certain topics, through a textbook or whatever it is.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the thing you said around how so many AI tools are really designed to get you the best answer as quickly as possible kind of relates back to what we were talking before in the context of companies like Chegg or Course Hero that made a lot of money helping students get answers. But your point is, to really learn something requires struggle. It requires going through exercise after exercise after exercise and making some mistakes and learning from those mistakes and building real muscle around how to solve a difficult problem. And so you're needing to design AI to solve for a very different use case, which is not just getting the student to an answer quickly, because that's not driving learning. It may help with grades, but it's not driving real learning. And instead, helping them work through that difficult process of truly mastering a subject. So let's talk about who are the early adopters for Honen. I know you guys just launched it publicly last month, so it's very early. But are you finding that there are particular industries or particular types of professionals who are gravitating to Honen first, and how do you see them using it?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Honen is how horizontal it is and how many different use cases can apply to different businesses or different people. One specific thing that we're seeing very interestingly is the trades. Trades is actually something that we're getting a lot of traction in, specifically with unions. So, for example, like servicing to plumbers unions. And I think the reasoning for that is they've been an underserved community from a tools perspective, and us being able to come in and say, hey, we can train your information in a much more advanced way and in a way that will actually lead to certifications and completion rates is what they're looking for. And it's something that's been a challenge, especially MedGas certification, specifically in plumbing. So being able to target a very specific use case and helping them solve that problem has been successful for us so far.
That's fascinating. And my wife, Ashley, is somebody who's spent the better part of her career on youth apprenticeships and workforce development. So basically helping students who don't have the interest or the means to go to a 4-year college or university instead get real workforce training and build real skills while they're still in high school by apprenticing with other companies. And in some cases, those are apprentices who are engaging with the trades. And so I can see how a tool like this would be really helpful for that type of business to just train up their workforce in ways that, hasn't historically been very accessible to them, because most of the other software companies out there are building for white collar companies and not necessarily for trades or crafts. So that's really cool that's where you're finding some of your early adoption. How do you think Honen evolves over the next 3 to 5 years as AI continues to progress? And what do you think your growth and monetization strategy will look like for that part of the business?
Yeah, so I think right now we're definitely focused on people that can see the immediate use case and need for Honen. But I think over time, the thing that we want to start developing is the idea that you can have your own internal L&D team as a 10-person startup or as a 20-person startup. And how we're developing that over time is internally as a startup, we're using Honen for every single thing that we do. For example, one use case as to how we applied it in our own internal training is cold calling. We actually had one of our marketing members who doesn't really have any sales experience at all or knows anything about unions, take a Honen course about unions and cold calling, which took her probably, I want to say, an hour and a half to finish. By the end of the course, she was able to start taking calls and start right away. Not only on understanding what Honen is, but also understanding how to do cold calling and then also how to market to unions. The breakdown of that course was very much applied learning and very much interactive. So, for example, getting an understanding of what unions are, and then after having an actual simulated voice-to-voice experience with what a cold call might be like. There's actually a feature in there where if you ramble for too long or you keep on talking too much about something that they're not interested in, it'll actually just automatically hang up on you and be like, I'm not interested. And then you'll get a grade, you'll get a feedback saying, hey, you messed up here, 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 let's try it again. And you'll just keep on going until you get it right, until you get that booked call, basically.
Yeah, well, that's so cool that you're dog fooding your own product and that it sounds like it's having real value for your own sales team in this case. Well, let's get into our lightning round. I'm just going to ask you a series of rapid fire questions. You can be quick 1 or 2 sentence answers. I always ask the same question first, which is, what is the best part about working at StudyFetch? What truly separates your culture or your working environment versus other tech companies? And then what's one thing that you would change or that you're actively trying to change as the co-founder and CEO of the business?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we really try to prioritize at StudyFetch is making sure that everybody has a say in what is happening in the business. And I think what makes it so exciting to work at StudyFetch is how fast we're moving, but also how profound the goal and the outcome of what we're trying to do is. I think a lot of the times there's some companies that tend to move a little bit slower that are more like morally driven. But I would say what makes us so exciting is having both of those things combined. I would say the one thing that I personally want to get better at as a CEO is making sure that everyone from a communications perspective is in the loop, because things are moving so quickly, especially with conversations that I'm having with my co-founder Ryan at like 2 a.m. That might change a lot of the things that are happening at one point, but some people that are actually involved in that process might be out of the loop. So I think in the future, making sure that everyone is in the loop and having a scaled way to scale information while context is consistently changing. A great use case of that is actually Honen. So maybe we start using that for more internal communications more.
Well, that's very wise as a young founder CEO to recognize that communication is only going to become increasingly important as you scale. And obviously, much easier said than done. I've never seen a company do it perfectly, but there's certainly companies that do it better than others. And so I'm glad you're already thinking about that as a priority. What was your favorite subject in school and why?
Not many. To be honest, though, I had a lot of fun with physiology, specifically practical human physiology. And the funny thing with that is when we started StudyFetch in 2023, while I was still at NYU, dogfooding the product was actually a big part of the features that we were developing. And I was basically the guinea pig for, is this product going to be successful or not? Is it actually going to lead to better grades? And I was using StudyFetch specifically for my physiology class. And I remember not studying that much at all going into my first midterm, and I got like a really bad grade. And then started implementing StudyFetch in my own studies for the final, and I had basically gotten like a 40% increase on my grade or something like that. So
wow,
that gave us a lot of conviction for really diving into the product.
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's a testament to how much impact AI can have if you apply it in the right place when it comes to learning. And I've seen this. We work with a number of ed tech companies with my consulting business, as you know, and some perform better than others, but quite consistently, they show real improvement in grades, and that's encouraging. So how did spending years as a serious musician influence your approach as an entrepreneur?
I think the thing that I learned is that being with the right team is super important. And even just like having the right bandmates and band members around you, there's a huge difference between someone that you like really have strong chemistry with and someone that you don't. And it really does make that extra difference, and really does take you to that extra mile and makes you go from normal to extraordinary. And I think being in a startup, it's so competitive, and it's so important to have that extra leap that no one really tells you about. Like there isn't really like a playbook or a blueprint that you can follow. But the one thing that I try to keep in my mind as we continue to progress is always having the extraordinary element to it, and being surrounded with extraordinary people, and making sure that you guys are always in the same wavelength. So I think that's probably like the biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. I tell people often that people are a leading indicator of success. And if you follow great people around, good things tend to happen. So I've made all of my biggest career decisions based on people, and that served me very well. And it sounds like you're taking your own advice, because Ryan was obviously a childhood friend of yours, and you guys kept in touch, and you prioritized that above everything else when you started StudyFetch, and it seems to be working for you. A couple more here. You've said your core operating principles are hope and agency. So what exactly does that mean? And how are you applying that as a founder at StudyFetch?
Yeah, so I think starting off with agency, it's important for every team member to understand that they feel like they have that, and that they have the capabilities to figure things out themselves. There's a lot of benefits in being a founder and having the experience of being a founder, in the sense of making something out of nothing and having the experience of seeing success doing that. For example, like a great example of that is, like cold DMing a bunch of people, and DMing people that you might not expect will get a response. But if you end up getting a response from someone that you really look up to, or someone that, you thought you're never getting a response from, then you think, oh my God, I could start doing this. And then you develop that confidence over time for more and more and more extraordinary things. And you end up in a situation where, wow, I could do all these different things that I never thought I was able to do. So that's what I think about when I think of agency. It's putting your best foot forward, and seeing those results, and then hope as a result of that. Being at a startup, you're finding new issues every single day, and you wake up the next day and there's 50 problems that you've woken up with, and understanding that you can solve those problems, that you have the capabilities and the confidence to go through that process, and end up on the other side in a successful way is something we try to encourage in every single person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it relates back to what you said around StudyFetch's culture. And one of the things you love most about the company is that everybody has a voice. To me, that's very tied into a sense of agency and autonomy. And there's been quite a bit of research that shows that one of the most important ingredients for human happiness and thriving is autonomy. So that feels really important. And then obviously, if you have that, then you have hope. And that leads to a positive attitude and a feeling that you can accomplish a lot, even when obviously at an early stage startup, things can feel overwhelming at times. So let's wrap up with, what is one profound change that you think AI is going to have on education over the next few years?
I think that AI will allow people to 1000x the speed of content being produced and taught. So for example, I don't think there's going to be a world where college is going to be the only way to actually develop and learn skills. I think it's going to come from many different capabilities and platforms to learn from. And a great example of this is YouTube. Like going on YouTube and finding very, very profound and interesting videos that can actually lead to a new skill that you can develop yourself, or insights that you've never gotten otherwise. And the accessibility of information is I think the direction that we're heading. And I think what AI allows us to do is harness that information in one place. And the platforms that are able to take that information from A to Z are going to be the platforms that people will start using to actually learn information in the fastest possible way that they would have never been able to learn before through college.
I like that. And it's a great note to end on, because it sort of comes full circle back to the point that, ed tech has really been around for about 25 years, since people could study on the internet. And a lot of the early ed tech companies made their money on content, but a much more narrowly defined type of content that, as we talked about, really helped with homework solutions and getting unstuck on certain questions. What I hear you saying is, it's now going to be possible to generate content at 1000x faster speeds. And when you can generate that much content, one, you can help people solve and learn much more complex problems over a much broader range of subjects. But two, you can also start to personalize how they're learning that content And that goes to some of the success you've already seen in terms of why a tool like StudyFetch can be so effective, because you can really tailor it to each individual student. Well, this has been a really enjoyable discussion. I knew it would be. Any final thoughts for our audience before we wrap up?
I guess like wrapping up on the last point that, we were discussing around the future of education, I think that everyone will basically have accessibility to their own mini school, their ability to have their own teacher, their ability to have that content that's being provided to them from A to Z. So I don't know, I'm really excited for the future. And I think as adoption happens more and more and more, and people start seeing these amazing things with technology and AI, I think it's going to be a much better world in the future.
Me too. I certainly hope you're right. I mean, there are a lot of doomers out there who talk about all of the bad things about AI. But as a father of 2 daughters, a 9 and a 6-year-old, I'm certainly rooting for companies like you that are going to make education easier for them when they get to college. So thanks, Esan. This was great.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Phil.
Thanks again to RevenueCat for sponsoring this episode. If you're building a subscription app, you can use RevenueCat to power purchases, optimize paywalls, offer discounts, handle refunds, manage customer data, run A/B tests, generate insights, and unlock more revenue. I work with dozens of subscription apps, and most of them are already using RevenueCat to power their businesses. Learn more at revenuecat.com/subversive.